Welcome back to the show. I would like to introduce you to Anthony Musci, a special guest today. Anthony is a guy that was on the original design team for Aston Martin's V12 engine. It was quite a remarkable feat. So Anthony's going to talk to us this today about leadership and how it would benefit your store.
Thank you for inviting me today, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Paul has asked me to speak a little bit from my experiences about leadership and what makes an effective leader and how you do it. So we've all heard, the cliche things, be honest and open, to be a true leader. But what does that really mean? Well, of course, you have to be honest and open, but you have to really show it, and you have to really be engaged with your team, because what happens is, if you're involved at a personal level to some degree, and I know some of your organizations are very different sizes and there are different challenges there, but if you really get to know your team outside of a work situation in terms of like just asking how they're doing, what's going on, really understanding a little bit about them, when the time comes and you have a work situation come up, they'll come to you, they'll be open to you, and they'll already be comfortable with you. One of the other things that I always get asked is, how do you build a great team? So how do you build a great team? Well, it's building it. Everyone thinks they have to hire all these great people, and that is an important part. You do have to have key strategic people on your team that get it, that know how to lead, that are self-starters. But the reality is, most of the time, you're not going to get just that. What you're going to get are average. Why is that? Well, average is the average. So how do you take that average team and grow them into a truly exceptional team? And that's what I've had the opportunity and pleasure of doing, and literally had done to me as well with some of my mentors. And really, the first thing is about building true teamwork. And again, that's also a cliche. But how do you bring that teamwork together? Well, when you're on a team, there are team functions. And let's take a dealership as an example. You have the finance team, the sales team, the service team, etc., and they're all working together. Most of the time, they're kind of working in their silo. The finance guys are doing the financial stuff, and obviously the sales guys are doing the sales stuff, and the service guys are doing service stuff. Predominantly, that's going to be the case most of the time. But you really have to take that investment and that time to let them work with each other quite a bit in some of the other areas. And I'll give you an example. The sales guys do know a lot about the products, but I think remarkably, particularly when there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of the service guys know quite a bit about the product and can assist the sales team in doing all these things. And when they start to work together, not only will they see the other parts of the business, but they'll appreciate what each other does as well. I don't think we're going to have, the sales guys turning wrenches and the finance guys turning wrenches, but I think they can get involved and see what's going on and understand it better. A lot of your better sales and finance people may do this already. But I'll give you other examples of where you can build that teamwork. If there are retirement plans like 401ks or similar, the finance guy in your department understands how that works and can probably help the HR people kind of cascade that through the system and really build so that the guys on the service floor are understanding their options and not just kind of handed this booklet and say, go home and read it. And how does that matter? Well, that manifests itself in many different ways. When you have different situations in the business, financial, service-related, sales-related, they're going to start to see each other's problems and understand them, because when they learned about their 401k, guess what? They have an appreciation for the costs in the business, and they're not just turning the wrench in the service department and kind of getting the quickest times. You're also going to find they're less stressed. They feel like you care about their situation a lot more. And when you have this cross-functional team building, they trust each other. If there's an absentee, they can cover it. As this dealership gets busy, the service guy is going to be able to talk with the customers a lot more, and he's going to sound and feel a lot more like the sales guy because he's learned from him and they've learned from each other, and vice versa. The sales guy is going to understand how long it's going to take the service guy to do something. You're also going to get these better, well-rounded people that if someone is out that day, they're going to be able to handle it. They're going to be able to pick up the slack. They know what that guy's job is. And really, at the end of the day, as they start seeing these things, often the management feels it's their job to see all these things and make these connections happen. And that is important. But the reality is the guys working in these functions day in and day out have spent more time than anyone in management possibly could do doing this. And when they start to understand those different areas of the organization and they trust you and they trust their team members, the ideas are going to be more open and they're going to be better because they're going to understand how all that works. Other things to consider are suppliers. When you're dealing with your suppliers, now obviously you're all dealing with an OE and they're a very tough supplier, and I could probably do a whole episode alone on that, but you're also dealing with many smaller suppliers. And if you're treating them just like you want to be treated, you're going to see tremendous gains. And I'll give you an example from my experience. I was in a small company at one point, and we were in a tough situation and we needed to make some sales. And the finance team was making promises to suppliers that frankly I wasn't really comfortable with in terms of volumes and how much work they were going to get. And I was actually concerned that, we were in a situation where it wasn't clear that we would make it as a company, but it was also a situation where I wasn't really sure where it was going to go in terms of the sales. So I sat down with the suppliers and I said, look, you're a little company. I know we're promising you a lot of orders, and I want to make that happen more than anybody else. But I also don't want you to bet your kids' college tuition or your house mortgage on it. And I want to really figure out a way that makes this work all around. And the reaction I got was an extremely positive one. One of the guys sat me down and said, thank you, I really appreciate that. That honesty means a lot to me, and it helps. And let me see what I can do. A couple of days later, he calls me up and says, come on over, I got a few ideas. And what we did is we figured out an idea to handle the volume, the maximum projected volume we thought we could do without risking him. It actually reduced our overall tooling. And I had built a much stronger relationship with him, because one of those things that we can all see is if you look at both sides of a situation, you have to ask yourself, can you live on both sides of that situation? And I'm constantly asking myself that, because if I'm doing something that's good for me and not for the other guy, realistically, it's not going to be good for me long term. Maybe short term, I might get away with it, but not long term. And when you're looking out for your suppliers, guess what? When you're not watching them, they're looking out for you. And I find that I often become the preferred guy they want to sell to. They come to me and they say, well, what else do you need? What else can we do? Yeah, I deal with this other guy and he's a pain in the behind, but I want to do something with you because it's always successful. I always make a lot of money. We reduce the risk. When there's a problem, you let me know right away. We figure it out. There's no finger pointing. And I think all of those relationships, whether they're internal or external, as you build those, make tremendous differences. And what I find is one person can handle larger projects and you end up with less stress and less uncertainty and worry, because instead of you just worrying, you got your whole team worrying. But to be honest, because they're getting that information, they're often less worried and know what they need to do, and they just do it. And when they get into trouble, they can get the help they need. Another important point is to talk about incentives. So we all think about incentives as cash. Now, if you give the employees a good incentive alignment, you're going to get good results, because we always get what we ask for, right? I had another situation where I had a woman who was working for me in a specific job that was a pretty easy job that she was way overqualified for. My boss came to me one day and said, I don't really like the fact that this individual doesn't seem to be really motivated. She should be working hard and trying to get into that next position, et cetera, et cetera. And I had to kind of push back really hard on my boss. I said, whoa. You leave her alone. I said to him, I explained to him the situation. I said, look, she has a couple of kids at home. What's really important to her, or her incentive, is that we pay her well, and it's a job that starts and ends at a specific time, and she doesn't have to worry about it after hours. She can focus on her kids. I said, the fact that she's way overqualified for this job means that if you push her out the door, I will never be able to replace her with anyone as good. And the great part was her stuff was so organized, so well done, and all together. And that was kind of the deal I had with her. She knew that I could only pay so much for that position, but my contribution was I gave her a lot of flexibility. I gave her, very little hassle. We integrated really well, and that was a tremendous benefit for her. And I knew that if we pushed her and said, well, why don't you go to the next position where you're going to be managing more people and doing this, that, and the other thing, she would have left and gone to another company. So always, always, always think about what are the true incentives and not just cash. That being said, figure out ways where you can share those benefits with your employees. It's been said many times that companies that figure out how to do that, and I've worked in many of them. A great example is piece price. If you give someone like the mechanics in the dealership some incentives to get something done more efficiently, and they do it, they need to share in that. I've seen situations where they get better, and then the new time becomes the new record time, and what it actually does is it disincentivizes them to work even harder. But when they get that payback and they see it, that efficiency grows throughout the organization and at all levels. You're all reaping the rewards. The final thing I'd like to bring up is, why are you there as a manager? Like, what's your purpose? Well, at least from my perspective, I like to have employees that can be pretty autonomous and do their own thing. And it takes time to get them there. And it goes back to my earlier point of building a great team. When I've gotten specific individuals in key areas, and then I kind of let them float a little bit to the other areas and see things, they start to become more autonomous. The trust builds. They know that their own skill sets have become more well-rounded, and they feel more confident. And over time, they become very autonomous. However, ultimately, as a manager, what you're really there for is when stuff goes wrong. And when you have a really strong team and a team that has a lot of trust, they come to you. Now, that's not to say, you're not the guy that's there, to cause problems by any stretch. But at the end of the day, let's face it, that's what you're getting paid for. And when someone comes to you and says, everything's been going great, but now I've bumped into this, and they do it early, you're very effective at getting it done. And even if you can't do it, I tell my employees, come to me, and if between myself and yourself we can't figure it out, we'll pull somebody else in, we'll figure out how to do it. And I found by doing that, the efficiencies of organizations grows exponentially, and it's just tremendous. And it's much more rewarding because I have a lot more fun at work. I know my employees do, and I know it makes for just a great workplace all around. Not to mention we tend to make a lot of money, so that's always a good bottom line. The last piece of advice I'll leave you with is that. And I often say this to myself. In fact, I say this to myself almost every day. Remember, you're not going to be here forever. So as I look around, too many times I see people acting like they are going to be here forever. And when I remind myself of that, it tends to humble me and not think about what just can I do for myself, but what can I do for everybody else. And for me, that's probably the most rewarding part of being a manager. And I promise you, if you look at it that same way, I promise you'll have the same experience. Another area I'd like to speak to you about is diversity. And specifically, it's not the one you're thinking of. It's diversity of experience. So what do I mean by that? Well, we talked a lot about working in different areas, but the older people in your firm, such as myself, have had years and years of working on different projects. Certainly, people and human nature haven't changed. And no matter where you get that experience in your life, you can reapply it in different areas, and it's useful no matter what you do, even if you go to a completely different field. However, technology changes quickly, and often we'll have young people coming into an organization. And if you're trying to implement, for example, a new IT system, really both perspectives are important, and when they work together, they start to see things differently. A great example of this is if you're a dealer and you're trying to implement a new electronic system and you had a paper system, they're absolutely for sure. The guys that have worked on the paper system have some ideas that you know, we need to automate this and do that and do the other thing. But you may be surprised that the most junior employee that you know, maybe just just graduated high school or college, and he's come in and he's good with computers and plays video games, and he looks at what you're trying to do because you involved him in the process, and he says, well, I see you want to get here, and you're going to start from paper, but why are you doing this in between steps here? Why don't you just go from here to there, or why don't you just put it directly on an iPhone app or an Android app? And you step back and you think, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what ends up happening is both employees are truly enriched from each other's experience. We talked earlier about the different groups in terms of finance and service, but also age groups and different industries. If you had a guy that came from, manufacturing or the restaurant industry, it is absolutely amazing to me how you can apply things. And honestly, I've worked everything from Silicon Valley to automotive industry, to consumer products, to services, consulting, you name it. I've done a lot of these different things. And what's amazed me the most over the years is you would think, oh, all of my automotive experience when I go back and consult an automotive OEM is going to help me. And certainly it has. But what has been more surprising to me was when I worked in Silicon Valley, how much of my OEM experience applied to them and was a completely new idea. Or when I worked at an OEM after working at both an OEM and Silicon Valley again, I was able to bring fresh ideas in. So that diversity of your own experience as it grows and becomes stronger and grows across the organization will make your entire team much, much stronger.
Words of wisdom from Anthony Musci. Wow, that's great. You know what I love is that when you speak about leadership and leadership principles, is that you're speaking from personal experience. And experience is something that nobody can fake. So thank you very much for being part of the show.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Paul.